Let's now bring in SABC News Correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who is live for us in New York on reaction from the U.S. Sherwin, a very good afternoon to you. Perhaps before you give us that reaction, I want to, this is, of course, we're seeing a lot of moving parts here already. Just talk to us about how this deal has been structured. We know that the truce is expected to come into effect on Sunday, January 19, and it's spread over these 3 phases.
Yeah, so this is a very long process, and we are yet to be at the beginning of this process, Unati, based on what we are hearing now from the Prime Minister's office in Israel, that the cabinet will not convene to endorse this deal, that the mediator yesterday. I mean, there were a number of pats on the back from the likes of President-elect Donald Trump, whose envoy was part of those negotiations. We saw statements from the U.S. President Joe Biden. We saw reaction from the United Nations Secretary General. We saw reaction from governments around the world welcoming this move towards a ceasefire, including from South Africa. But let's sort of take a step back from the current iterations we are seeing today and explain what this deal will actually do, right? There are 3 phases. The first phase of this deal will last. It's supposed to kick off on Sunday, will last for 42 days. We understand that what it means is that 33 hostages, Israeli hostages that are being held by Hamas, will be released over a staggered period in those 42 days in return for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners released in exchange for those hostages by Israeli authorities. Israel is said to be ready, in terms of phase 1, to withdraw to the outskirts of Gaza. It won't be a complete withdrawal. And you will then see a surge in humanitarian aid. We're talking about between 500 and 600 trucks per day into the Gaza enclave during phase 1. We then understand that during those 42 days of phase 1, negotiations between the parties will continue to determine, Unati, whether phase 2 goes ahead or not. It's not a fait accompli. It depends on the implementation of the prescripts of phase 1, while negotiations will continue as to when phase 2 would then begin. That's our understanding, where in phase 2, additional living hostages will be released in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Phase 3 will only kick in after the successful implementation, obviously, of phase 1 and phase 2. We understand in phase 3, deceased hostages and deceased fighters, Palestinian fighters, the corpses will be exchanged, and at that point, all of Israel's military will have withdrawn from Gaza, and then the focus becomes on the reconstruction plan, the implementation of the reconstruction plan for Gaza. You will understand, Unati, that much of the enclave, its infrastructure, people's homes, roads, piping for water, schools and so forth, have been destroyed. And what the UN Development Programme tells us is that you're looking at a price tag here in terms of reconstruction over the next 2 decades, the next 20 years, of between $50 billion and $80 billion. So that's what the plan says, but we're waiting for final agreement now from the Israelis.
Absolutely. And already there are concerns on whether or not this plan and this deal will hold. I mean, we already hearing that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused Hamas of backtracking on some of the details of the deal. Hamas has, of course, denied this. But Netanyahu delaying Israel's cabinet vote does raise some concern about how this will then impact on Sunday's deadline. I mean, what would the implications of a delay mean in your view, Sherwin?
I mean, I think it's important to just point out that despite what the mediators had said, SABC News has been reporting that this deal was still awaiting final approval from Israel's cabinet. So we have been getting this pretty much correct in terms of the fact that this deal was not finalized until you have all the T's crossed and the I's dotted and signatures on the bottom line. And so what you're hearing now from the Israeli Prime Minister is that Hamas is reneging on parts of the agreement reached with mediators, and Israel in an effort with Israel in an effort to extort last-minute concessions, and of course the Israeli cabinet not convening as a result of that. What we are reading into some of the reportage around this is that there are a number of issues here. The first one is that there's some concern about where Israeli troops will or will not withdraw to in terms of that phase 1 of the ceasefire deal. Will they pull back to the outskirts of Gaza or not? That seems to be one sticking point. Another sticking point we're hearing is that Hamas the Palestinian prisoners that Israel is earmarked to release in exchange for those hostages They want the names of these Palestinian prisoners. And then there's a third issue, of course. The right-wing elements in the Netanyahu coalition government are not in favor of the ceasefire agreement. They do not want Netanyahu to make too many concessions, and many of them have expressed a desire for this war to resume once some of the hostages have been released. That is what we understand to be some of the sticking points. I can also tell you, we've heard from John Kirby. John Kirby is the spokesperson for the White House National Security Council. He's been doing the morning shows in the United States this morning, and he said the following: there are a number of details that require clarification, but it is not true that the ceasefire agreement has collapsed. We are confident the details Netanyahu talked about will be settled, and the implementation of the agreement will begin on Sunday. But again, if we even get to the beginning of the ceasefire process on Sunday, there are so many things that can still go wrong. Will rocket fire from Hamas into Israel stop? Will Palestinians, be able to survive? Given despite the truce talks we are seeing today, we are getting reports that over 70 people in just the last 24 hours have been killed in Gaza due to Israeli military action. So, are all those elements going to, work towards implementation of phase one? And then you're talking 6 weeks in the first phase. Who knows how long the second phase is going to be? How long will this ceasefire process last? Because we haven't gotten to phase two yet. So many unanswered questions about how this will go. And if you then have success in terms of the 3 phases, there's the whole rebuilding of Gaza that needs to happen. The long-standing issues in terms of a 2-state solution, settlement expansion in the occupied Palestinian territories. How will the long-standing issues be resolved? What does that peace process look like? We're a long way away from a resolution to this decades-long conflict, Donati.